Billionaire's son throws a drink at Black Maid, not knowing she's his long-lost sister. It was a lavish evening at the Davis family charity gala. Ethan Davis, the heir to a fortune, was seated among the high society, his life filled with luxury. He had never known hardship. Wealth, power, and status had always been the foundation of his world. But amidst the celebration, his gaze landed on someone different, Jasmine, the maid. Despite her humble position, she carried herself with a quiet elegance. As she passed by with a tray of drinks, a small mistake happened. A drop of liquid spilled onto Ethan's suit. Without a second thought, he snapped, throwing the remaining drink at her, causing the room to go silent. Jasmine stood still, humiliated, but didn't react. Ethan, however, felt nothing but indifference. To him, she was just another worker in the background. What Ethan didn't know was that this small mistake would change everything. Jasmine wasn't just an employee, she was his long-lost sister. The following morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of guilt gnawing at him. The events from the night before weighed heavily on his mind, though he pushed the thought aside as business concerns took over. However, the image of Jasmine's stunned face kept returning to him, a reminder that his actions, though trivial to him, had deeply affected someone else. At the Davis estate, Ethan received a call that made his blood run cold. It was from the family lawyer, a voice he hadn't heard in years. He was informed that Jasmine was actually his sister, separated from him at a young age. His heart raced as he pieced together the details. His parents had arranged for her adoption after a tragic event that split their family apart. Ethan had been shielded from the truth, raised in a bubble of wealth and privilege, unaware of the sister he had lost. With this revelation, Ethan felt a rush of conflicting emotions: guilt, shame, and disbelief. He remembered his parents' lessons about status, and how they had always told him that wealth defined one's worth. Now, he was faced with the truth that a person, his own sister, had lived a life entirely separate from the one he knew. One filled with hardship and struggle. But what really shook him was how easily he had dismissed Jasmine's humanity the night before. To Ethan, she was simply a maid, a face in the crowd of employees who came and went. He hadn't even thought to look deeper. His mind spun. How could he have been so blind? Determined to make things right, Ethan went to find Jasmine, though the idea of confronting her terrified him. What if she hated him? What if she wanted nothing to do with him? His life of luxury had shielded him from the pain others endured. But now, he had to face the reality that the world he lived in was built on false pretenses, and that his own actions had contributed to someone else's suffering. Jasmine, meanwhile, had no idea who Ethan was. To her, he was just another rich man who had mistreated her. She had grown up with foster families and learned to fend for herself in a world that often overlooked her. But deep down, there was a part of her that still held on to the hope that one day, she would find her brother, the one she had lost so many years ago. As the tension between the two worlds grew, Ethan had to make a decision. Could he bridge the gap between his life of privilege and the reality Jasmine had lived? Would she accept him, or was it too late for any kind of reconciliation? The story was just beginning, and the emotional weight of their estranged bond loomed over them both. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Jasmine from his mind, her expression of shock, the hurt in her eyes when he'd humiliated her in front of everyone. Every part of him wanted to apologize, to try and fix the wrong he'd done, but he was hesitant. He didn't know how to reach out. What words could undo the damage he had caused? Jasmine, on the other hand, had felt a deep sense of betrayal after the incident. She had worked for the Davis family for years, taking pride in the work she did despite the constant dismissal from the upper class. The mistake with the drink was an accident, but Ethan's reaction, it had cut deep. She had never imagined anyone could act so cruelly, especially not someone in a position of privilege like him. She hadn't known the full truth yet, but something in her gut told her there was more to this than a simple workplace conflict. She'd heard rumors over the years of a sibling lost in the shuffle, but the truth seemed so distant. The possibility that Ethan was her brother? It was too much to comprehend. But then, one day, everything changed. Ethan, unable to bear the weight of the secret any longer, found himself standing outside Jasmine's small apartment. He had a feeling that she would be home alone, a break from her duties at the mansion. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached for the doorbell, each second feeling heavier than the last. Jasmine opened the door, her eyes narrowing as she saw him standing there, his face filled with uncertainty. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with a mix of anger and confusion. "I need to talk to you," Ethan said quietly, feeling his nerves settle for the first time in days. "It's important." Jasmine crossed her arms, a protective stance. "You already made it pretty clear how important I am to you." Ethan flinched at her words, the bitterness in her voice stinging more than he expected. "Please, just hear me out." She hesitated but stepped aside, allowing him in. Ethan's eyes scanned the room as he walked in, noticing the stark contrast between his world and hers. This place, small but cozy, was filled with warmth. It didn't have the wealth or status he was used to, but it had something more precious: heart. Jasmine closed the door behind him, her gaze fixed on him, waiting for him to explain himself. "I don't know how to start," Ethan said, his voice soft, filled with regret. "But I owe you an apology. For everything. What I did, how I treated you, I can't take it back. I was wrong." Jasmine looked at him, studying his face, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. "You think an apology is going to fix everything?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I don't. But I need you to know that I didn't understand. I didn't understand the way my actions affected you. Or anyone. I grew up in a bubble, never seeing beyond it, and I've been living a life where I thought money and status meant everything. But now, I see that family, kindness, real connection, those are what really matter." Jasmine's expression softened, but her eyes still held a trace of skepticism. "You don't get it, do you? You don't understand how many people like me get crushed under the weight of people like you. People who think the world is just theirs for the taking." Ethan swallowed hard, knowing she was right. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want to try. I want to get to know you, Jasmine. As a brother. Not as the guy who threw a drink in your face." Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. She had always dreamed of reconnecting with her family, but this? It was more complicated than she had imagined. A part of her still wanted to hate him, to resent him for everything he represented. But another part of her, a quieter, more vulnerable part, wondered if there was a way for them to rebuild what was lost. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," she said quietly, her voice breaking slightly. "But I'm willing to listen." Ethan's heart soared with hope, but he knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, and their bond was fragile. Jasmine wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet. But for the first time in his life, Ethan was willing to put in the effort. No amount of money or status could fix the damage between them. Only time, understanding, and true sincerity could bridge that gap. And so, the journey began. Both of them, from opposite worlds, slowly starting to navigate the fragile path of reconciliation, knowing that it would take more than apologies to heal the wounds of their past. But the first step had been taken, and for the first time in a long while, they both felt a glimmer of hope. In the days that followed, Ethan's attempts to reconnect with Jasmine were met with cautious acceptance. He'd visit her regularly, keeping his distance but showing up consistently. He learned small things about her: how she loved to cook, how she spent her weekends volunteering at a community shelter, how the years of hardship had shaped her into someone who valued love over wealth. But one evening, as they sat together, something shifted. Jasmine broke down, her guard finally crumbling. "You think you can just walk into my life and fix everything? You don't know what it's like to struggle every day." Ethan listened, deeply moved by her pain. "I can't fix it, Jasmine. But I can be here. I can be your brother. That's all I can offer." Her sobs quieted, and for the first time, she looked at him, not with anger, but with something softer. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive you, but maybe we can try." It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. Ethan understood now that healing would take time, and that real change wasn't something you could buy. The wounds they both carried ran deep, but there was a chance, just a small one, that they could heal together. Ethan stood at the doorway of Jasmine's apartment, unsure if he was ready for what came next. The emotional journey had been long, awkward, humbling, and filled with moments of realization. The moment Jasmine accepted his invitation to dinner, a step towards rebuilding, it felt like a quiet victory. As they sat at the table, Ethan shared memories of their childhood, things he'd forgotten, but somehow Jasmine remembered. "I used to watch you from the window," she said softly, "hoping you'd come back." The words hit Ethan harder than anything he'd ever encountered. He understood, finally, the impact of his absence. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for not being there. I wasn't ready." Jasmine smiled, the faintest hint of hope in her eyes. "It's not about what you can give me now. It's about us. What we can build." As the night ended, Ethan knew that things wouldn't be fixed overnight, but they were on the path to healing. They were no longer strangers but siblings learning how to be a family again. The brokenness was still there, but the love between them was beginning to rebuild, one small step at a time. Weeks passed, and Ethan and Jasmine's relationship grew stronger with each passing day. Ethan, once consumed by wealth and power, was now consumed by the need to repair the deep void he had ignored for so long. He continued to visit Jasmine regularly, not as the billionaire heir, but simply as a brother trying to make up for lost time. One afternoon, while walking through the park together, Jasmine turned to him. "You've changed," she said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "You're no longer the man I met that day. You're learning, and that's all that matters." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling. "I've learned that family doesn't need riches or status. It needs understanding, love, and the courage to admit mistakes." Jasmine nodded, her face showing the quiet contentment of someone who had found peace. They stopped by a bench, the same bench where their paths had nearly crossed years ago. They sat in silence, feeling the warmth of the sun on their faces, knowing that they had begun to rebuild what was lost. The past no longer held power over them. The future was theirs to shape, together. As they stood to leave, Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, faded picture, a picture of him and Jasmine as children. "This is us," he said. "This is who we'll always be." With a deep breath, Jasmine looked at the picture and smiled. "Yeah," she whispered. "This is us." Ethan and Jasmine walked side by side into a future where healing wasn't just about wealth or mistakes, it was about two people finding each other, piece by piece. The story wasn't over, but they had found their way back to one another. If you've enjoyed this story, please like, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartfelt journeys.